Okay, good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome back to this special meeting of Angus Council. I'm going to go straight to questions relating to both budgets, both the motion and the amendment. Councillor Juan.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much. And I'll just start off with asking a couple of questions on the SNP alternative budget. It's as expected. You'll realise this is going to be around the Arbroath active travel, but I'm kind of disappointed. You know, we're saying that we've listened to constituents. Well, I certainly listen to constituents and attend the community council meetings and attended the public meetings that were there for everybody to attend. And I would say it was pretty mixed for a while. Certainly the reviews that you get on the social media can sometimes be 50-50, sometimes sway 60-40 either way now and again, depending who comes on. But I was quite concerned that they said that we obviously haven't listened to the constituents in Arbroath, and just attending the community council there on Tuesday evening, everybody was at that council. Granted, it wasn't a huge turnout, but was certainly in favour of seeing the money being used and spent in the way that's predicted on the active travel. Now, you mentioned consultation. You would like to defer this. Have the SNP team been in touch with Sustrans, one or the officers, to see if the Sustrans would allow a deferment? Can I ask if there has been any implications in any of the budgets, or maybe they don't require that at the moment, for any increase in construction costs if this are deferred? Because as we know, construction costs are going up on a weekly basis at the moment for all projects, and that will include civil engineering such as this. And have they taken, and I think Councillor Duff did mention that they would just use, if you could clarify that for me, or one of the officers could clarify that, any abortive costs that are there at the moment with us deferring this or coming out of the project totally, are they to be taken out of our reserves? But I am disappointed that for some reason our SNP colleagues don't want to see these improvements made in Arbroath, and that's really my big concern. There are a few concerns with the budget, but that is my big concern as being a ward member in Arbroath, and I would like that clarified if I can, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Juan. Which officer is going to answer this? Or Councillor Duff, do you want to come in and answer some parts of that?
Well, Deputy Provost, I'm quite happy to. I would say that in terms of the funding of the project, my understanding is there's already £1 million worth of contingency that's been used to bridge the gap between the Sustrans offer and what's currently in the capital plan. So there's already a plan to use reserves to do the project as it was, or contingency. My understanding, if it is cancelled, then that would have to be met like any other project that's cancelled from contingency. My understanding is that I don't know if we've got an exact figure. I think maybe one of the finance officers may be able to give it us, but the spend so far is not huge, and our concern is about the overall the 4 million, which ultimately we could end up spending, and we are concerned that the project doesn't have public support within Arbroath. And as I've mentioned, the budget is very much pressurised by the Money Thief School project, which we think for us is a higher priority, and we think this is it's a good project. I don't doubt it. We're in favour of active travel, but we think this is too much spend in one location, and an active travel we should look at an Angus wide approach rather than just focusing on one location.
Okay, can I just come back on that, Chair?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, just on that, obviously Michael Matheson shook hands on the deal with our leader here to say that well done Arbroath, you're one of the first towns, or are the first town, to be provided this money out with the sort of central belt, or the major cities, if you like. And I think that's something that this council should celebrate rather than criticise or look to, divide the money around the other towns or areas within Angus. There's plenty of opportunity for bidding into Sustrans money in the future. Something I think Councillor Salmond did raise, that there may be concerns that will Sustrans even look at Angus again if we shake a hand on a deal and go back on it. And that's the kind of concerns that I have. And just quickly on the £1 million contingencies. That £1 million contingencies, I believe, is actually within that budget for the Sustrans to cover any overcosts at this point of construction, not to take into consideration any increase in construction costs that might be there in 3-4 years' time as you're proposing. So I welcome the officer to come back with some of these costs that I asked for earlier, if they can.
Thank you, Councillor One. Mr. Lorimer, do you wish to comment? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, just put my hand up there, Deputy Provost. Good afternoon, councillors. It may be that Mr. Cochrane wants to add a little bit, but yes, my understanding of the proposal from Councillor Duff is if there were to be abortive costs, i.e. if Sustrans were not willing to flex in terms of the timescale for delivery of the project, those abortive costs would need to be met from the capital contingency. The project, you might remember from last year's budget, there was an element of funding that hasn't been secured yet. The use of the council's capital contingency was a fallback option for that circa £1 million that needs to be secured. We were still hopeful of securing that from other external sources. In terms of the detail, though, and any discussions with Sustrans, it might be that Mr. Cochrane would want to add to what I've said there, Deputy Provost. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lorimer. Mr. Cochrane, do you wish to comment?
If I may, I'd ask Mr. Scott to comment. He's been more involved in the discussions with Sustrans. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, of course, no problem. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yeah, just in terms of the figures that were asked for by Councillor One, the current commitments to the project, which would be to the end of this financial year, is £158,000. In terms of the costs, if there was a deferment of the project by 3 years, then that would incur inflationary costs over that 3 years, so that would need to be accounted for. Just to expand and clarify on the £1 million that was in the capital contingency, as Mr. Lorimer had identified there, that was very much to cover the risk allocation. As members may recall, although it's a year ago, there was a risk allocation of 44% of construction costs, and therefore the decision made by the council at that time was to put that risk allocation into capital contingency. And therefore, with the project seeking to drive down that cost and keep that to a minimum, it was felt that was the most appropriate area for that figure to come in. And as Mr. Lorimer had identified there, we'd also be seeking the opportunity for additional match funding to offset both that £1 million, but as importantly, the £3 million that was identified within the capital plan.
Mr. Scott, can I just ask for clarification on was it 178,000 you said was the abortive cost to date?
158,000.
158. Can you confirm if that includes the officer's time over the last couple of years, or is that purely external engineers and surveyors' reports?
It includes the eligible costs for the funding. Councillor One includes officer time, but that is only from stage 2 of the project. Everything from stage 1 was signed off and paid for, but in terms of accepting the grant offer, everything from stage 2 would be eligible. So the £158,000 includes the staff time and also the costs incurred from the consultant who's been appointed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Scott and Councillor One. The next question, Councillor Devine.
I had hoped to get in before Councillor One there because I wanted a point of clarification probably from Mrs. Buchanan. It's to do with Standing Order 8.5, where it very clearly states that all proposals for budgets should be with the Director of Finance no later than 15 working days. And yet for the second year, we have had rabbits pulled out of hats once the administration has seen our budget proposals, which were published and were not changed. I don't think we would have been allowed to change it. So we really do need to know whether the spirit of Standing Order 8.5 is being upheld here.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Devine. Mrs. Buchanan.
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and thank you, Councillor Devine, for your question. In terms of Standing Order 8.5, you'll see that albeit there's a provision which allows alternate budget proposals to be brought forward, there's also provision that says that it will not prevent an elected member bringing an amendment or amendments to any proposals during the council meeting as provided for in standing orders. And I would ask Mr. Lorimer just to confirm it, and I'm assuming that's the case, that any further amendments that were made beyond what was in the papers complied with the standing orders in terms of that. I'm assuming that was the case, but perhaps he could kindly confirm. Thank you.
Could I just come back on that, please, a minute? Because these were not put forward as amendments. They were just put into the budget. We could have, we could have discussed them if they'd been amendments, but they were not brought as amendments. There will be another amendment coming up, but it is being tagged as an amendment. These weren't.
Well, the administration, of course, bring the motion in terms of the council budget. So in terms of that, any aspect of which they detail in relation to the motion is part of that motion. If Mr. Lorimer would like to come in.
Okay, Deputy Provost.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just looking at the wording of Standing Order 8.5, what it talks about is the publication of budget proposals, but excluding the rate of council tax and any contributions to or from the council's reserves, which are only disclosed as part of the budget meeting. Now, I think the items to which Councillor Devine refers to are part of those use of council reserves. So there's proposals have been made there in terms of expenditure funded from reserves. And as Mrs. Buchanan points out, the publication of the budget does not inhibit councillors from making changes to what has been published, providing those are made within the terms of other standing orders, and i.e. submitted prior to the meeting according to those deadlines. So I hope that clarifies the question, Councillor Devine.
I'm not sure that it does. I just have to say, I will use a really good Scottish word, and this is sleek it. You know, they have looked at our budget. They have seen proposals such as the gully cleaning and the pavement cleaning for flooding, for flood prevention, and they've chosen to do that out of reserves. So it doesn't give me a very good feeling, Mr. Lorimer, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you all. But I think what we've heard from Mr. Lorimer and Mrs. Buchanan, it's perfectly competent. So,
point of clarification, Chair, if I may.
Yes, of course.
I'm a little bit troubled. I may have picked it up wrong, but it's concerning that Jackie Buchanan and Ian Lorimer's advice was somewhat different in terms of how they saw this initially. It was presented that these were amendments based on the standing orders, and Ian's actually quoted the standing order. Just to clarify then, it's all contained with, these are not amendments. These are within the standing order.
Okay, Mrs. Buchanan. Yeah.
Shall I come in?
Yes, Mr. Lorimer, of course.
Yeah, so the items to which Councillor Devine is referring to, those are part of the administration motion. So they're not amendments, they're part of the motion. And they're part of they've been assessed as being within the wording of the standing order, which allows items from reserves and council tax. They're not disclosed in advance and are disclosed on the day of the budget meeting, which they have been today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davey, a question?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. It was just 2 points just to clarify the differences in the budget. The first one, just for confirmation that the administration budget proposes 1.175 million for roads investments against the SNP alternative of 800,000, and I'm just checking I've got those figures right. And the second question was for point of clarification. In Councillor Duff's speech, he mentioned about Montrose flood defences. My understanding of the capital plan is there's money allocated for Montrose coastal defences, but we're waiting confirmation from the Scottish Government that they're going to pay for it. So it was just to clarify those two aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duff, do you wish to answer this, or will I ask an officer to do so?
What's the question? Sorry, what's the question, Deputy Convener?
Councillor Davey, would you like to repeat?
Yeah, I'm happy for Councillor Duff.
Well, I mean, it's the one about the Montrose flood defence as well. The question about that is it depends what they're going to cost. You know, I think we're expecting a report from Glasgow University and SNH sometime in June, and I suspect what is in our budget is probably not sufficient, having seen the sort of talk of that. So I just don't think there's enough. What I'm saying is that we've got concerns because if you read the long-term affordability, there are a lot of projects in the council plans, and there is virtually no money free, as that report makes very clear, in the next 5 to 6 years. Now, people in Montrose are very concerned about coastal erosion, and there are a couple of high-powered studies going on at the moment. Where, you know, there is going to be criticism if we're spending money on a nice-to-have project in Arbroath, and we're not addressing the roads, and we're not addressing the flooding and the coastal erosion issues. These are, to use my term, needs, not wants. A rejigged road system is a want; it's not a need.
Sorry, it was as well to seek the officer clarification on the progression from that Scottish Government, because the capital project paper stated it's awaiting Scottish Government funding. And the second question, the first question I asked, sorry, was on the difference in SNP and administration proposals, and it was just to check the numbers of 1.175 million from the administration on roads investment and 800,000 from the SNP alternative budget.
I think there's 2 points there, Councillor Davey. The proposal from the administration is a one-off. Because you've produced it on the day, it's a one-off. It's not, our investment is recurring. So you've pulled a rabbit out of the hat once you've seen our budget. We were investing it there continually. And I'd also point out in our capital plan, we have put, I think, a sum of 800,000, I think, off the top of my head, in capital. So if you've got to take that in as well. I think it's, I've not got the figure right in front of me, but so you've got to add that in as well. And I think you'll find if you do that, we're actually spending a little bit more on roads.
Okay, Councillor Duff, while you're looking for that figure, I think Mr. Scott wants to come in as part of this question anyway. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yeah, just to direct the members to page 283 of the papers. There are two items that are related to the point that Councillor Davey makes in terms of the Montrose Coast Protection preliminary works, of which there's a commitment of £4 million, which requires match funding from capital grant from Scottish Government of 3.2 million, which is the 80% as standard. There's also an item below that, which is for flood risk management, which again identifies the contribution in future years or in coming years and future years of the capital investment, which again is dependent on the Scottish Government match funding, the 80% coming from those. So there are items within the financial plan as presented on page 283.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Scott. Councillor Duff, are you ready to come back now?
Yeah, I think the capital figure is 800,000. I was right in the first instance, which we've added to our capital plan.
Thank you very much, both. Okay, a question, Councillor Durno?
Right, thanks, convener. It was just really to get back to Councillor Wan. I think he's known from the beginning that I wasn't happy about the Sustrans dual carriageway project. when I actually spoke to Sustrans about it 3 years ago.
Councillor Dunn, is this a question? Is this a question?
It's really just to answer back Councillor Wan's.
Well, look, no. This is questions. This is questions. You can do that under comments after the questions.
Right. Okay. As long as
Okay. Yeah. No problem. Councillor Fairweather, question.
Yes, it is. Right. Thank you, Chair. It's for Walter Scott. I've got. I did note that Councillor Duff said he's not against the Arbroath Active Travel project, but he would prefer it was Angus wide projects. What I'd like to ask Mr. Scott is, does he think that would jeopardise, if it is delayed or stopped, would it jeopardise further future projects with Sustrans?
Deputy Provost, can I come in, please?
Yes, of course, Mr. Scott.
Thank you. Councillor Fairweather, it's a subjective question, in which case I can't be definitive. What I can direct you to is the report 8620, which is approved, or the recommendations are approved at last budget, that highlighted the risks in terms of either taking or not taking the funding. And therefore, what I can say is that the opportunity that was identified there would be lost in terms of our growth. Whether that had an impact on future opportunities is not something that we can be definitive on.
Thank you. Can I have another one?
Yes, of course.
It's regarding the recycling feasibility in the SNP budget for Carnoustie and Moneyfeith. If it were to happen, one site being found, and we tried that and got no place, but if it was found, would it have a general waste facility?
Okay, Councillor Duff, that forms part of your alternative budget. Do you wish to answer that? Councillor Duff or Councillor Whiteside?
Yes, that would obviously be for the feasibility study to determine, I would imagine. We believe that the feasibility study could show that we could create a fit for purpose centre at net zero cost compared to the two existing centres, but that all of these items would be discussed within the feasibility study, and that's what we are proposing.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Braze, question?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Convener. I have a question for Councillor Wan, and I will have a comment as well later on. But this question is for Councillor Wan. When he says that support for the active travel plan for Arbroath seems to be 50-50, the meeting that I went to in the Webster Theatre, the meeting was very hostile to this. And would Councillor Wan maybe address that particular meeting, and perhaps he would be able to comment on the feelings that there are in the rest of the county, where people are very aggrieved that so much money is being spent on a single project in a single town, and which is going to be of absolutely no benefit to them.
Through you, Chair, am I okay to come in, or is that a roll call that I answer a question when it's not my paper? But I'm quite happy to come in with that. Well, yes, Councillor Braze, I would have suggested that that meeting did seem hostile, but I think, as usual, you'll always hear the loudest voices at these meetings, and the silent majority maybe just didn't speak up so much because there was a few of Arbroath's well-known critics there that really don't like anything that the council at the moment are proposing, and that's just the way of life, unfortunately. You know, we find that all the time. But I presume you haven't been to the Arbroath Community Council, so you can't really comment on that. But when I spoke to them on Tuesday evening, I mentioned to all the community councils that were there, and they have had no letters, emails of objections to this project. And in fact, not on a personal, well, personally, they're all supportive, but I believe the Community Council is also supportive of this. And in reply to your question on other areas in Angus, you know, it's down to the council officers, I suppose, to make judgment and to apply to sustrans for funding in other areas. And I'm sure if Brecon, for example, where I know there's a lot of criticism at the moment from your community council on projects that the councillors there are maybe not cited on or are cited on and not agreeing with the community council, you know, we don't seem to have that issue in Arbroath. It all seems to be quite coherent with our community council. But, you know, I'm sure that Mr. Scott would be looking at sustrans funding elsewhere. In fact, I believe there's also money being allocated for the one in Monteith, which I think joins up to Broughty Ferry. So, you know, we're also looking there. And I think there's also a project I heard the other day that's being looked at in Carnoustie. You know, an active travel path in Carnoustie that Councillor MacDonald, or I can't remember, it was Councillor Cheap maybe mentioned, they weren't quite sure exactly where that was. I don't know if it's in its infancy, but I know that, you know, I'm sure Angus Council will do everything they can to get sustrans money for other areas, and I'm sure the council will look at all these areas if the sustrans are awarding money and put in capital as well, if capital is available. So, you know, I really hate this kind of jealousy type of thing. You know, Arbroath's getting this, Arbroath's getting that. When I spoke to them on Tuesday night, they were actually really over the moon that for some reason Angus in the last 4 years has picked up a lot of awards and money for different projects. And the jealousy issue here between boroughs, I don't think is founded, because, you know, everything will happen all over Angus, I'm sure. And maybe Mr. Scott would come in on that if there's any other plans that he can mention just now, or touch on some of the ones that I have mentioned.
Yes, I'm just going to ask Mr. Scott if he wants to make any further comments, but maybe you don't, Mr. Scott.
I would just direct the council to the report that went to Communities Committee last week on the pipeline of active travel projects. So that does set out clearly the overall programme and the aspirations that we'll have for active travel. And that does link in on the other successful bids for Places for Everyone and the future potential for those bids.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Salmond. Councillor Salmond, you're on mute.
Oh, yeah, apologies. It's a question for Mr. Scott on the Arbroath Active Travel project, and it's around the according to last year's budget report, 9.278 million, which is the Sustrans allocation to this project. The question really is there a risk to this 9.278 million if the project's delayed for 3 years? And I think we need to be clear here and explain to the public, just so there's no confusion, if I'm correct, that we can only use this 9.278 million for this project. This cannot be taken and spread around Angus to deliver other projects. This is a direct contribution from Sustrans to the Arbroath project.
Mr. Scott, please.
I can confirm that the £9 million plus can only be used on the Arbroath project as approved, and therefore it couldn't be used elsewhere within the council. It is specifically to this particular scheme. In terms of the whether it will be agreeable in terms of deferring that would be a matter to take to Sustrans, and that would be dependent on the decision today and any future decisions made by the council.
Can I just have a follow-up to that?
Yes. Yes, of course.
Can you just confirm then, if for any reason Sustrans decided that they weren't accepting a 3-year delay, they would take this 9.2 million back and then redistribute it to other projects around Scotland?
The terms of the approved agreements are that if there was a default in terms of that or a subsequent withdrawal, then that then allows for the reclaiming of any costs that have been paid on that project to go back to Sustrans. I wouldn't be able to comment on how they would then reuse that money.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor MacDonald, a question?
Be very brief, I'll not get involved in personal attacks. I'd just like to ask a question. Has it been known for public bodies like Sustrans to hold grudges and not decide projects on their own merit.
Mr. Scott, is this one for you?
It's not something I feel I can commit to in that regard. I'll comment on, Deputy Provost.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hans, a question?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. It's actually a point of clarification, although if I'm not allowed that, I can turn it into a question, because it was just to refer back to something that Councillor Wan said about the active travel scheme for a money thief. It was just to point out that that only came about because of funding from Dundee Council and not anything from Angus Council. There has been officer time involved in it, but it has come from funding elsewhere, and we're very grateful to Dundee for allowing that to come out as far as money thief.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Scott, you any comment for that one?
All I would say in respect to the project, it is a cross-border project where Angus has been a partner on that in terms of the bidding for it. Whether without that cross-border work, the project would have been approved as it has done, I don't know, but certainly the comments back from Sustrans have been very positive about having that cross-border nature of it.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councillors MacDonald and Salmon, you've had questions, but your hands are up. Do you want to come back? No?
I have another question on a different subject.
Yeah, as long as it's a question. Yeah, it's fine.
Just a question. So it's probably for, I suspect, Councillor Duff. It's to do with the money thief Carnoustie recycling feasibility study, 50,000. So reading the note 5, if I'm getting this right, you're proposing a full service recycling centre. So can you give me, please, what your definition is of a recycling centre?
I think Councillor Whiteside has answered that question perfectly satisfactorily. We're proposing an officer-led feasibility study. I'm not going to prejudge what the officers come to, the conclusions they come to. It's up for them to use their professional expertise to have a look at it, have a look and see what's the possibility of an alternative site and come up with a proposal. That's not my job. I'm putting a sum of money in our budget to allow the officers to look at it. And the officers might come back and say it's a ridiculous idea, but that's them. We would like to see it. We think there is a need for it. The Money Thief Recycling Centre, as I'm sure Money Thief members know, is completely inadequate. We have to pay a large fee every year to the Ministry of Defence to access. And from memory, the Carnoustie site is not ideal either. The access is poor. Both sites are nothing like as good as they should be. And I think one site suitably located would be much more sensible, and it would probably have lower running costs. But that's for the officers to judge once they've done their feasibility study.
Sorry, can I just have a follow-up, Deputy Provost?
Yes.
Can I ask who wrote note 5 then? Was it an officer that wrote the note to the bid? Because I need to make a judgment today on the information that's been presented in the papers. And I'm reading note 5. And my second follow-up question would be, you don't seem to have put anything in the capital plan to deliver this project. And you've made a statement earlier that there's no capacity at the moment in the capital plan for new projects. So how are you intending to deliver this project should the feasibility study, one, find a site, and two, once it's costed, how are you intending to, you're looking to cancel other projects to bring this project in, or how were you funding it?
Councillor Whiteside, I think, is going to answer this. Yes.
Yes, I can answer it, but I would like a point of clarification before we go any further. It was my understanding that during council meetings such as this, each member only got one question, and we're having members popping in with more than one question. So can I get clarification on that before this carries on for hours and hours? And in answer to Councillor Salmond, the feasibility study is to replace both existing centres with one fit-for-purpose centre. Now, we believe that that can be achieved without additional spend. if done correctly. And also we've got an ongoing revenue cost to the Montefiore Centre that is to the Ministry of Defence, which is a complete waste of council funds. So that would contribute to the running costs, and obviously the running costs of two centres is more expensive than one. So that's why it's a feasibility study, so that we can explore all these issues. And like Councillor Duff says, we can't prejudge the outcome of that. Thank you.
Right, just before we go any further, Mr. McCaskill, can I have a bit of advice here? Is it the standing order that permits one question, or is there discretion to the chair?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. Just refer members to Standing Order 15.3, and it says no member shall speak more than once, except when raising a point of order and making a point of clarification, moving or seconding a procedural motion in a debate on any one motion or amendment. I think, Deputy Provost, in terms of the number of questions, a number of them were points of clarification. So in terms of the strict rule, only one question from member, but in terms of clarification, there's no limits in terms of points of clarification.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. McCaskill. Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Provost. It's actually a question back to make a very simple point back to Councillor Salmond on the classification of a recycling centre. Bearing in mind the administration continues to crow about keeping 7 recycling centres open, does he classify Arbroath, Forfar and Montrose as having waste and recycling centres, or just recycling centres?
Councillor Salmond.
I was asking a question on number 5. That's what I was looking for an answer.
The first question you asked.
It's not for me to answer that question. I'm asking a question about number 5 for the person that wrote note number 5. I didn't write note number 5.
Sorry, can I go back to Deputy Provost? I was asking a question because Councillor Salmond earlier asked a question to Councillor Duff about the feasibility. Would it be for a recycling centre, or would it be waste and recycling? I'm saying we have 7 recycling centres in Angus, albeit a number of them have waste and recycling, but the administration seem happy to call them recycling centres. So there's no reason why this proposal feasibility study can't address itself as a feasibility study into a recycling centre, regardless for the purpose.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cheap. I'm sure your comments are noted. Is there anyone else for a question? Any more questions before we go to comments?
Yes, I have a point of clarification.
Okay, Councillor Fairweather.
Again, to the SNP budget. If after the feasibility study it says it can have a general waste facility, would the SNP allow that, considering the council has declared a climate emergency?
Don't really think I understand the question, Councillor Fairweather. I mean, you're asking me to prejudge what's going to come out of a consultation. It would depend on the council's budget and what was appropriate. And we're talking probably some years down the line, I would guess. I think you're asking a question that can't be answered.
I think you know fine well what I'm saying. At the end of the day, we have taken away from a number of sites the general waste, because that is part of the problem for a climate emergency. I'm asking if your feasibility study says you could have one in Carnoustie and Montefiore joint site, would you have that facility or not?
Okay, well,
I think we have to wait for the feasibility study, Councillor Fairweather. I mean, you know, if you're correct and the amount of general waste is reducing every year in Montrose and Arbroath and Forfar, then who knows where we'll be in, 2024 or whenever we're ready to move forward. But you're asking me to hypothecate on something several years down the line. I think the residents of both towns deserve a proper, good standard recycling centre. As a number of members have mentioned, the Montefiore one is not adequate, and we are paying whatever it is, £25,000 a year to the MOD to access it. and the Carnoustie one is also not fit for purpose. So build one, perhaps between the two towns, that's a modern one fit for purpose, and I'll be advised by the officers as to what services it should provide.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hans, a question, because your last one was a point of clarification. So you haven't had a question.
Yeah, it is a question because I'm a bit baffled now. So basically, with the potential of a shared recycling centre for Moneyfeith and Carnoustie, the fact of the matter is as well that they'll have more opportunity, I would hope, for different recyclings to be done in a local area rather than having people having to travel to either Forth or Arbroath. So surely to God, that makes sense in terms of the climate because of unused carbon dioxide for needless road travel. I'm a bit perplexed as to, again, if we're discussing this recycling centre, everybody in Angus has waste. Why would it make any difference whether we had a joint recycling centre between Moneyfeith and Carnoustie? Is the assumption that everybody in Moneyfeith and Carnoustie are going to be irresponsible and go, oh, we've got a brand new recycling centre.
Mr. Hans, is there a question here? Have you got a question?
Well, I just want to know, why is the assumption that general waste couldn't be accommodated? And why is the assumption that it would create more harm for the environment? Surely to goodness, it would be less.
Mr. Ball, would this be one for yourself? I don't want to put you on the spot.
It's a difficult, very difficult one for me to answer, Deputy Provost. In terms of a new recycling centre between Moneyfeith and Carnoustie, this is something that we've looked at in the past, as members are well aware. We have been unable to identify a suitable site. I would also say that the sites at the moment in Moneyfeith and Carnoustie, I would strongly argue, are both fit for purpose. I wouldn't allow a site to be open that wasn't fit for purpose. So in terms of usability, health and safety and all the rest, the sites as they currently stand are fit for purpose. And they do offer a full range of recycling facilities at both of these sites. So the only facility that they don't offer at the moment is the potential for general waste. And as you'll be aware of my long-standing held view on that one, it is that the system that we've implemented has worked exceptionally well, and as both the leader and the deputy leader alluded to this afternoon, has won national awards. So I would have to have a very strong business case presented to me before I would be inclined to unpick that. So I'm not sure if that's answered the questions, but that's my view.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ball. Councillor Boyd?
Yes, it's not. No, it is a question. It is, and it's to Stuart Ball. Sorry, we were very formal today. Stuart, you've said that they offer both full ranges, but there are no space for carpets, there's no space for mattresses, there's no space for other recycled things that are there, because if we had one that was together, we would then have the space. This is what Councillor Cheap and I brought forward on many occasions when we brought forward countless budgets to say, and the reason why it was not agreed was because we didn't have the space to do and the space to do with everything that was recycling. And we're still waiting for a space to have carpets that can be recycled. We're still waiting for a place for mattresses to go that can be recycled in South Angus. So it's a red herring, this idea that we're trying to be bringing back rubbish. We don't have enough space just now to even bring back the full recycling things that would be offered elsewhere.
Mr. Ball?
Yes, well, there is actually a facility for recycling carpets at Carnoustie, so we are running a trial for that at the moment, and only Arbroath and Carnoustie, as far as I'm aware, have that facility on offer, so that is available within Carnoustie. If that was to be successful, then we would roll that out to other sites, and space would be available to do that. I think the point I was trying to make was that the facilities that are available at Moneyfeith and Carnoustie in terms of our recycling materials are exactly the same as they are at the bigger centres as things stand.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ball. Councillor Davies, use a point of clarification because you've spoken already.
Yeah, apologies, but it is a point of clarification. It's both to Mr. Ball and Councillor Duff. Mr. Ball alluded to earlier that there had been work looked at for a location before in the past. So would this money allocated for the feasibility study be doing that work again, or would you suspect that we us to be able to identify a new location?
Okay, Mr. Ball, I think this would be for.
Yes, we have in the past looked to find a suitable site for a recycling centre between Carnoustie and Monteith and been unsuccessful in doing so. That's not to say that a site doesn't exist, but of course one of the first things that a feasibility study would have to do would be to identify the location of the site, and because that would then I suppose inform costings. So whether there was to be a purchase price for the site and how much engineering works was required and all the rest. So that would be one of the first things that a feasibility study would have to identify, in my view.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ball. Councillor Boyd, is yours a point of clarification or is that a previous hand?
It's a previous hand.
Okay, thank you. Right, there's no other hands up for questions, so we'll now go to comments. Councillor Boyd, your hand up for a comment?
No.
That's okay. Councillor Durno.
Yeah, just getting back to the places from everyone, Joe Carriageway and Arbroath. Everybody knows that I am with cycling and walking because I'm in for the free come to Arbroath cycle path and the Marywell cycle path. I'm not against the places from everyone concept. I'm just against the fact that we don't actually have the money to pay for it all. And it's okay saying we're going to have money from this and money from that. But when you get you get constituents phoning you up asking you why you can't get a dog bin or why they can't have hanging baskets on the high street because we don't have enough money. Everything's we don't have enough money for this, don't have money for that. And then they say, well, why are you digging up the Joe Carriageway to spend all the money on Joe Carriageway if we can't get a dog bin? It's like, we all want fantastic projects. I mean, I have spoke to Michael Matheson about it. I've spoke to Sir Stan about it. Everybody in an ideal world would want everything, but we have to have the basics and the council fixed first. And then any money we'll have at the end of the year or whatever, we can do this. But to justify spending money that we don't have when we have holes in our roads and we have other things, people don't understand. They don't understand that we've won this money. And for Derek to say about Councillor Wan to say about the community council, there probably was only 5 people at the community council this week because they were all at an SNP meet. So, that doesn't, 25,000 people in our growth, having 5 people at a community council think it's a great idea, does not say the general public. And I know this will go through anyway, because I mean, the point of 2 SNP councillors objecting to spending all this money is irrelevant. This will go through anyway. So it was just to point of clarification that I do want active travel. I just don't think we can actually afford it at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Durno. Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'll beg to differ with Councillor Durno. There is money there, and I'm absolutely sure by the end of the project, all the money will be there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been this far down the line. It's nearly 2 years ago that I did go through to Perth and I met Michael Matheson, the SNP Cabinet Secretary, and I did shake his hand. He congratulated Angus Council on presenting a stellar project for places for everyone. Money that normally goes to the cities, and Arbroath in Angus became the first town to receive such an award. It was 7 million at that time and has gone up to 9 million. I find it astonishing that the SNP's budget could potentially lose this funding. And we could also be in a position of paying back default penalties. This project will deliver cleaner, greener accessibility for thousands of locals, for our visitors, for years to come. It'll join the town back together. And it will increase the footfall at night for our local businesses. It will also address the largest contributor of carbon emissions, and that is transport. At a presentation last Friday, we were given a flavour of what it could and can look like. And you know, it was absolutely stunning. And as these proposals come forward, and obviously the consultation is ongoing, and the general public from Arbroath can be involved in saying what they are looking for and what it will eventually look like. It will be an absolute stunning project for Arbroath. But we've got another scenario here. Just imagine if we did lose that money. Imagine if Susran said, okay, right, we can delay it, but that money can be used elsewhere. And I know for a fact that Perth, right, are desperate to get more money. Then they have projects sitting, waiting to happen. So are we going to let that money disappear down 30 miles down the road? And are we also going to jeopardise future funding, such as the Arbroath-Freakham Cycleway, the Brecon-Montrose Cycleway? I can't possibly support a delay of this project. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Members, at this point in the meeting, I've got to remind you about the 3-hour rule and terms of Standing Order 21.7, and I'm going to move that this meeting continues to the conclusion of the business. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. The
Agreed.
next one for comment, Councillor Vaughan.
Yeah, thank you. It was just really to come back on Councillor Durno's comments still on active travel, and I'm glad that she's agreeing that active travel is important. But I would just like to ask if she would also agree with me when she actually stated that everybody is entitled to essentials and necessities. And does she actually think that hanging baskets in the high street are a necessity or an essential item?
This is comment, Councillor Vaughan. It's not questions. It's not a question.
No.
Comment.
Okay, but I'm coming back to my comment. I would suggest that essential and required and necessities is for people to be able to walk down the street without tripping up, without having to have barriers to cross junctions that we already have in Arbroath that have been identified by engineers and have been actually identified by the members of the public when the consultation originally went out. Now, what we're forgetting here is that they're asking for a proper consultation to be done. The consultation is still ongoing. The consultation hasn't concluded. The designs haven't concluded on this. And again, we do have the money, just to back up what Councillor Fairweather's saying. The £9 million is there from Sustrans, and it was agreed last year in the budget that we would contribute our share from Angus Council. That's the last thing I want to say on that one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. Yeah, I just want to go back to the recycling thing here. We keep hearing, you know, from members that they keep going on about us saying that we've kept all 7 centres open. Well, the stark reality is, if this administration wasn't sitting here today and it was the SNP that was in power, these other centres would not be open today. The SNP said that they were going to close 4 of the recycling centres. We have kept 7 open. So, you know, and as some of my administration colleagues have already said, what a success story it's been. From the baseline of 51% for recycling at our 7 centres, this rose to 63.5% in year 1920. The significant increase in recycling at all these centres was the main contributor to the increase in the overall household recycling rate. And this has resulted in the county being placed 2nd out of 32 Scottish local authorities for household recycling. How is that not a success? In 2018, the overall recycling figure sat at 54.7%. That's well above the national average of 44.9%. In 2019, Angus residents continued this trend and more, with the recycling rising by 4.4% up to 59.1%. We're sitting second place, 32 local authorities in terms of recycling. Now, the 2020 figures, they've not been released yet. And that's going to be about, I think it's September that they come out. To top this off, as you've already said, Deputy Provost, we were selected as winners of this UK award. And that's thanks to the efforts of the residents in Angus, combined with that of the officers, the staff at Angus Council. We were successful in getting this local authority success category at the National Recycling 2020 awards. And that was for the recycling centre redesign. So finally, thanks to the contractual agreements that we commenced in November 2017, we send our residual waste to the Waste for Energy at Baldovey. And this means that Angus is also one of the best in terms of sending, or rather not sending waste to landfill. Only around 5% of our waste now goes to landfill. Given that back in 2017, when £250,000 of savings were required to be made, we were able to deliver this without closing centres, and the second place in recycling table, along with the national awards, is a testament to the success of the 7 recycling centre model that this administration introduced. I don't see a need for a feasibility study as outlined in the opposition's budget, and I can't support it. For me, that would be a step backwards. So please support the administration budget. Thank you.
Deputy Provost, could I have a point of order, please? Can I just correct Councillor Stewart, who made an incorrect statement at the beginning of his speech? He said that the SNP proposed to close 4 centres. That was incorrect. This is repeating the misstatement that Councillor Fairweather made at a meeting several years ago that I had to pull him up on. The SNP proposal was to go from 7 centres to 5. We were proposing to close Kirriemuir and close, I think, Montefieth. And I point out to you that Montefieth...
Councillor Duff, this is not a point of order. It's not a point of order. I'm sorry.
Well, it is. It's
not
correct.
A point of order.
An untrue statement.
What number of standing order does it refer to then? Councillor Moore, comment?
Thank you, Deputy Convener. Yes, I'll start by just agreeing that it's been very difficult circumstances, and we should be praising officers for managing not only to continue providing the standard services, but so much more for the residents of Angus. They deserve all the praise that we can give them. I'll just touch on the recycling centres briefly, and early in the life of this administration, I recall Councillor Duff standing up in the chamber and stating that we didn't need the Bring sites because we were doing very well on the curbside. Now he's asking for looking at a Bring site. I'm glad he's changed his mind and agrees with where we've gone. I'm a little bit disappointed with the winter maintenance. It's a standstill position. It's a shame that no extra money has been found to ensure that all children in Angus have the same level of safety to go to school. If you live in one of the boroughs, your pavement is gritted before you go to school. If you live in one of the villages, you go to school before your pavement is gritted. And that is a shame on us. And it's something that should be looked at, especially as we've got all the 140-hour children as well. And talking of gritting, can I just pay tribute to a gentleman in Freecombe, James Anderson, because there are not many residents who will get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go round with a pedestrian gritter to make sure that the pavements are gritted for their fellow residents. The only other thing I have to say is I have concerns about taking the £1.727 million not to increase council tax. I can fully understand that it's the right thing to do this year, but unless it gets built into future budgets and future grants from the government, we're going to end up one year having to find the money for all the things we need to do and this 1.727 million. So I just hope that the Scottish Government will build that into any future grant settlement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. And Councillor Moore, I'm not sure you realise, I think you will do, there is to be a review of winter maintenance anyway. So if Councillor Salmon nods his head, I think that's correct. So if you feed into that and raise your concerns about certain areas you've just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Blaze, a comment?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillor MacDonald asked Mr. Scott if Sustrans hold grudges, and Mr. Scott said he couldn't answer. And then Councillor Fairweather seems to want to cast aspersions on Sustrans' ability to look at each new application on its merits. I find that quite astonishing that he would even discuss that in the meeting. I note the administration's last-minute addition to its budget is trying to match the SNP budget proposal on road maintenance. And I suppose imitation is the greatest form of flattery, but would point out the administration proposed less money than the SNP for road maintenance, and all of it is for 1 year only, whereas our proposal offers extra money for future years. And we're the ones who are actually listening to what the people are saying. I would also like to comment on something I brought up last year, Deputy Provost. I brought up the issue of the very inadequate Common Good Fund budgets that were in the papers. Now, I realise from the papers that officers are to bring forward to the Policy and Resources Committee much more detailed budgets, and they'll come forward in May. I certainly welcome that because at the moment I feel that we're almost sleepwalking our common good funds out of existence, and that would be a tragedy because they've been around in some cases for hundreds of years, and if they were to disappear, it should be after proper discussion and proper consideration, and not just, as I say, sleepwalked out of existence. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blaze. Councillor Hand, a comment?
Yeah, I do have a comment. It was just to remind members, and especially those that haven't been in the council before 2017, but there is actually a recycling paper and to communities, and I think it was 2015 or 2016. And it actually highlighted at that point, the recycling rate for Angus was 59.3%, not the 51% that was muted earlier on. In 2015, we were already at 59.3. We went down the way, we're only just coming back up to where we were nearly 6 years ago.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hands. Councillor Duff, a comment?
Sorry, it's a legacy hand.
That's all right. That's okay. Councillor Davey, comment?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. It would be remiss of me not to focus on the economic issues facing Angus. Indeed, I and this administration are dedicated to ensuring we do everything we can to support our economic recovery. Already from these budget proposals, car parking charges will be suspended further to support our town centres. We've got the second lowest council tax in mainland Scotland, with residents paying hundreds of pounds less than in Dundee. We are committed to supporting our economic development. Already the huge raft of grants have been supported by our economic development team, who've worked phenomenally hard to deal with the raft of new grants we are required to administer. We have 16 staff working on payments to make sure that our grants get out to businesses ASAP. Our discretionary fund opened on the 29th of January, and our officials have worked tirelessly to get this money out to businesses. So I'd like to thank them for that. It remains to be seen that our powers are limited in these areas, and our job often ends up simply as administrating schemes, but this is still vital work. With the immediate challenge of supporting Angus jobs and businesses continuing, we also must invest in the future. This is why in the budget papers you can see the Tay Cities deal, a 26.5 million UK government direct funding of Angus, which is fantastic news, a 1 billion Mercury programme to attract low carbon and sustainable businesses. We've launched an Angus Buy campaign. We've seen further increases in property take-up up to 95%, including new tenants. Our projected income from property is above what we anticipated. We have set up business sounding boards alongside a raft of other measures. We are committed to ensuring our procurement spend is spent locally as much as possible, and we have some of the highest rates in Scotland. We will hopefully be able to go much further on this with freedom brought to us by our exit from the European Union and our exit from EU procurement rules, which have previously hindered our capacity to buy and spend locally. However, it does remain to be seen what these changes will result in, but I will certainly be keeping a close eye on any changes to make sure that we can make the most of this, because money spent locally is retained locally. If we look to the council plan, we can see a huge commitment to Montrose to build on our area of expertise, to really make Montrose and Angus the power of the North East economy. It was disappointing today to read about Montrose Port not going for the free port, but this council has succeeded in pushing for a drone port in Montrose. We see our business plan an absolute commitment to the Montrose Link Road, which would avoid Marykirk and Lawrencekirk and help reduce HGV traffic in Brecon and Montrose. It allows improved access to Montrose Port, GlaxoSmithKline, Baker Hughes, and we must have the commitment from the Scottish Government to build on this, and it's certainly something that we will continue pushing tirelessly. The Montrose Railhead improvement is also included, increasing capacity and cutting times. And all of these things are vital. My time is short, however. My final comment, I could go on many of the fantastic projects that Angus Council is going on. But Angus is short by £7 million in this year alone. Our coastal flooding protection works are still waiting from Scottish Government sign-off. We are doing so much in Angus Council, but if we were giving a fair deal, we could do so much more. We've heard from councillors, including Councillor Durno, saying that we don't have the money. But I hope SNP councillors and all councillors will join with me in demanding a better deal for Angus. Angus does not deserve a funding deal which has cost us tens of millions of pounds over the years. This year alone, we have a 7 million shortfall and we receive much less than the average Scottish local authority per head. And why should we be given less per head than other councils and substantially less than Central Belt ones? So yes, let us use the powers that we do have, but also be aware that we are often left out on government funding, which often seems directed at projects in the Central Belt, while Angus and the North East continues to miss out on our fair share.
Thank you. Councillor Cheap, I saw your hand up earlier. Do you still want to comment?
Actually, I do, Councillor Falling, but I'm happy to wait till other councillors have spoken because they've got their hands up now.
No, yours was up before. Carry on.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
carry on. No.
Right, thanks for that then. Okay, so I did take it down by mistake. Okay, from my point of view, I listened to everybody this afternoon about where to start really on this. I think having taken account of everybody's points this afternoon, but a bit of sleight of hand by the administration, their budget papers latterly, and some of the comments that have been made, I will be voting for the amendment to support the SNP opposition budget, which includes two key items not included in the administration's budget. One, the £50,000 towards a feasibility study for the new waste and recycling centre for South Angus to serve the people of Canistian District and Moneyfeith and Sidlaw, thus ending the discriminatory nature of this administration, asking the people of South Angus to drive up to 23-mile round trip to drop off general waste or other recyclables that can't be deposited in their own local yards. That, Councillor Fairweather, is not addressing the climate emergency. This, while administration members ensure full waste and recycling service in their own backyards and continuing the two-tier Angus we've witnessed in the last 4 years. Secondly, the fact that the SNP have quite rightly, in my mind, read and understood people's opinions across Angus, that the Arbroath Active Travel project is an unnecessarily overly expensive project, a project that even the consultants use and we listened to on Friday can't be sure will stop at £4 million cost to this council. The people of Angus want their roads repaired, urban and rural, and not unnecessary new ones created solely in Arbroath. And by repairs, we mean resurfacing, not just potholes. So I prefer to see the £4 million put to this instead. Rather this than just simply the 1.175 million that suddenly miraculously dropped into the administration's budget this afternoon. And I mean, this is something that Councillor Salmond rather poorly describes as a stunt, quite sad. Also, Councillor Wan, just for your information, the Sustrans element for Carnoustie is for a path across a public park, which no one in Carnoustie has asked for. So it's not exactly a big loss to us. And I'll also celebrate Arbroath Active Travel once we get all our priorities achieved first. And I wonder if Councillor Wan would celebrate if it was in another ward. Thankfully, we've only another year or so to go of the injustice of this administration lavishing cash on their own wards. As I suspect this will be their last budget, I have no doubt that the next administration in 2022 will put an end to such vanity projects and think about the needs of all of the people of Angus rather than the few, and in doing so, delete places for everyone and focus on, indeed, fairness for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cheap. Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Firstly, I would just like to draw attention back to some other aspects of the budget. I'm particularly proud of the additional investment of £620,000 for children and families, something that I have campaigned long and hard to secure. I'm confident that the permanent increase to frontline staff capacity will not only reduce the demands on caseloads, but will in turn help ensure all our children and families receive a much greater service that will enable a better quality of life. I'm extremely pleased that central to the proposed investment is a £140,000 uplift in funding to support the expansion of Angus Council's Children with Disabilities team. This investment reflects our commitment to ensuring that a wider range of children and families can access the specialist advice and support provided by the team. We must not underestimate how crucial these services already were pre-pandemic, throughout this last year, and will be during recovery and beyond. As we know, children and families who require social work support often experience trauma, poverty, and disadvantage out with their control. A harrowing and exhausting journey at best. And this additional support will help us work for a more equal and just society where human rights are respected and safeguarded within Angus. I continue to support the Places for Everyone Arbroath Active Travel project, as I've witnessed this project be born out of public participation. And although back in 2016-17, during early engagement, this seemed like an unrealistic ask or a long-term vision, the council took on the challenge that was given to them by the public and worked hard to secure the Sustrans funding to help make this happen. Something that no other town in Scotland has managed to achieve. This project isn't just about active travel, it's about enabling our citizens to be directly involved in shaping and influencing their environments to help create a more attractive and sustainable place of connection and enjoyment for everyone. I've also attended a number of virtual community meetings where the vast majority of people were in favour of this project. How will we ever tackle climate change and health inequalities and secure a better future for future generations to come if we don't have a vision and strive for better, especially when given the opportunity and over £9 million in funding to help us do so? I don't agree with delaying this project, but we do need to make sure that we set the pace right so that everyone has the opportunity to be involved, especially those who have the greatest travel and transport barriers or are not digitally connected. Throughout this year, we may have all experienced loss in some way and lost all hope. It was stated earlier, when people are able to enjoy attractive, well-kept environments, they have hope. I do hope that we can agree this budget, as many of my constituents and indeed residents throughout Angus don't want or need politicking, but need us to make best use of the money that we do have to deliver the best services and outcomes that we can in Angus. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. Councillor Duff, comment?
Yeah, Provost, I'll be very brief because I'm conscious I've spoken quite a bit, but just two quick brief comments. I think both Councillor Macmillan-Douglas and Councillor Davey have been making this point about Angus being underfunded. Can I remind them that there is a COSLA formula, which I think has got about 100 different measures that are used to calculate the grant settlement. And that's been agreed by COSLA for many years. So if they're unhappy with it, I would suggest that's the location they need to go. Clearly, there are council areas in Scotland with perhaps much more severe social problems than we have in Angus. And there may be good reasons why councils get differing levels of grant. If you look at the broad picture, from memory, most councils in Scotland, most mainland councils get about £1,750 per head. There isn't much variation, but I think it's a COSLA agreed formula. And if you're unhappy with it, I suggest you go to COSLA and argue your case. The second point really is a little correction for Councillor Davey about the Montrose flood and coastal erosion projects. We are not waiting for Scottish Government money. He's getting the cart before the horse. We are waiting for the consultants to report and advise what, if anything, we should do. That has to come first before we bid in for funding.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor MacDonald's actually next, but I see he's... We'll come back to Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Boyd?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Fairweather. First of all, I'd like to say...
I've been promoted, have I?
Oh, sorry. I hate this formality. I'd rather call you.
No, you said Councillor Fairweather, and I said, "Oh, I've been promoted, have I?"
My humblest apologies. But thank you for letting me say. First of all, I'd like to start with a little bit more upbeat, and I'd like to thank Councillor Macmillan-Douglas for the 140,000 monies that are going to be there to help the Sunday sensation in Carnoustie. And it will be lovely to see you when the Ladies Open is here. You get an open invite from me to come down, and you can see all the works that will have been done by then. And with tens of thousands of people coming to Carnoustie, it will be nice to have the area looking lovely. Also, just to remember that I know a few people say the Sandy sensation looks fantastic. It looks fantastic because David Selfridge, Councillor David Selfridge, managed to ring fence the sale of the Dalhousie Golf Club. So it actually was never council money in the first place. So, but it's nice to see them investing 140 now in sorting it out, as it's now that it's 10, 15 years old. Moving on to the budgets, I'm agreeing with Councillor Cheapen. He was far more eloquent than I could be within it all. I've been 10 years a councillor, and this is my 11th budget meeting. I had a baptism of fire 10 years ago, having only been elected as an independent councillor 3 days beforehand. But you know, listening to what other people have said, some councillors, and I'm being respectful here, some councillors weren't here at that point in time. So I did want to pick up on the point about the 7 centres. It really is unfair to be distorting what happened there, including yourself, Craig, on Facebook last night on that. Let's give people the facts of what was going on with that. I also remember Alan McEwen saying that we were second for an award many years ago, and we were bumping our gums, quite rightly so. So this is nothing new that we're second in wherever, Scotland or England or whatever. We were there, but of course there are newer members that were unaware of that. The other reason is for backing the SNP administration is to do with the recycling centre. You know, we've had no opportunity to even help councillors with the chance of maybe getting a joint recycling centre. And I'm genuinely sorry that Stuart Ball won't be here to actually work with David and myself in a year's time, when we will hopefully have a new administration, and we can work to make sure that Angus is fair for everyone. It is not fair that we have this tier system. It's a tier system through with recycling, and it's a tier system with potholes. I cannot believe that Angus Council, Arbroath councillors, who have just had a petition sent to them showing that 900 people would rather have the money spent on potholes, and I can't find anyone. And I'm up in Arbroath quite often, I can assure you, and I've got lots of Arbroath friends. I find nobody that wants this. They want the roads sorted out. They want the potholes gone. This Westway is in a disgraceful state just now. I have to do that when I have to travel up to Arbroath to get to the dump because I can't do it in my own hometown. So, we've got to prioritise things. And as I'm saying, listen to the people. Finally, here we are 10 years down the line, and it's sad in some ways to say it's history repeating itself. We can number crunch as much as we want under these 3 hours that we've been talking about it. In the end of the day, the electorate will see, just like they saw 10 years ago, that £10 million was getting spent on a pet project up in Montrose, and while the other boroughs lost out. That's life. That is life. And this will be the same thing that will happen then with that. It's really not on. People elect us for the whole of Angus to be treated fairly. And as I'm saying, just remember what the electorate did 10 years ago. It sounds very much like it'll happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Councillor MacDonald.
Apologies, Deputy Convener.
Oh, that's okay.
I was listening. I was just had my wee boy who you may or may not know had me and my wife had a baby last year, and he's 8 months old, and it kind of puts into perspective a little bit some of the stuff we've been going over today, getting really angry about things. And I'm kind of glad I got asked to go and give her a hand there a second ago, because it's daft. We've got in front of us 2 budget proposals that the administration think is the best one for Angus, and the SNP think their one's the best one for Angus. And the administration have the numbers, so the administration one will likely get voted through. We know that because of the way the discussion's gone. So it kind of makes all the pontificating a bit pointless, really, when actually the SNP budget is going to have a long-term strategy for fixing our roads, and the administration budget is going to be putting an active travel scheme in Arbroath to the tune of millions of pounds, with some of that funding coming from the Scottish Government. There's a lot of good stuff in both budgets. We're doing great stuff with social work. It's going to be needed after the pandemic. And, all in all, when you actually look at the breakdown, the councillors that are saying we want a recycling centre for Carnoustie and Montefieth, to have a look at that, are the ones that are generally from Carnoustie and Montefieth. And the ones like Councillor Stewart, Montrose, he's got a recycling centre, and he's saying, it's all fine. So there we go. That's how the game's played, I suppose, if we want to put it like that. I would like to take slight exception at Councillor Salmon's personal attack, which was on me, because I was in the briefing on the active travel, but I thought acting like a professional. The administration budget is likely to pass. You guys have the numbers. So if the project's going ahead, I've got to work with that, as well as being an active travel champion. He's an experienced councillor, the head of a department in the council in terms of the committee structures, and he's making assertions about Sustrans that I think we should look back at the video and actually see what he said, because I don't think, personally, a public body would react in that way when it comes to looking at different projects for funding. I believe Councillor Fairweather said it would jeopardise future funding. I'm not sure that would be the case, but hey, I might be wrong. The last point I would like to make is Councillor Speed, who I think in this council makes some fantastic points. She comes at stuff from a completely different angle from a lot of us, and she's a councillor that I think we often should listen to more. She said, however, we've got to do the best with the money that we have. And that's, I think, where the SNP budget's coming from. We're coming at it from a slightly different angle, where we're looking at trying to get the basics back in order, get our roads fixed, get everything back to where it needs to be. Then we can look at what we're trying to achieve going forward with the goals that we have. There's loads of opportunity for active travel in Angus, but we don't necessarily need it to go from Gayfield to Morrison's, half of which is already an active travel route anyway. There's a road there that you can cycle along. It's very nice. It's next to the sea. So there's a lot of stuff at play here. Like I say, for a bit of context, 2 budgets, different ways of looking at it. And that's the pitch. I'm going to vote for the SNP alternative. Thanks, Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillors Brazen and Boyd, you've already spoken, and I have checked with the clerk. You're only allowed to do it once, so could you take your hand
This is a
down?
point of clarification.
Oh yes, okay, Councillor. My apologies. On you go.
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Provost. We heard Councillor Davey saying that any proposed new Montrose link road to the A90 is going to cut out Mary Kirk. Now, of course, this project appears in both budgets, and hopefully if it can be funded, it will be a very worthwhile project. But as far as I'm aware, all the Montrose and Brechin ward councillors have been involved in consultation about this from very early days. I've never had any notification that a decision's been made on which of the many routes that were proposed has actually been taken. So I don't see how we can possibly say, or how Councillor Braden can possibly say that that Mary Kirk is going to be cut out from the link road. And I would just like clarification whether a decision has been made on the route of the proposed Montrose A90 link road, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brazen. Now, if I'll maybe need a bit of officer assistance here, which officer would like to or is able to answer this to Councillor Brazen?
Deputy Convener, I'll come in on that if I.
Yes, okay, Mr. Scott, no problem.
Yeah, there's no decision made in terms of the preferred route. There are still a number of routes that are identified and are possible. Some of those include the route through Mary Kirk, some of them don't. So there is no absolute confirmation of the line and the route.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarity. That's exactly what I was seeking.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor McLaren.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. It's just regarding the climate emergency funding. As chair of the Member Officers Working Group on Climate Change, we're currently developing our Sustainable Energy Climate Action Plan and expect it to be complete in May. This will be reported to the Council thereafter. The purpose of the CCAP will provide a roadmap demonstrating how Angus can both reduce its carbon emissions and increase the resilience of the region to the potential impacts of climate change through concrete deliverable actions. After the results of the actions, we will review the situation. And at the Policy and Resources meeting on the 8th of December, part of the report stated that to meet the net zero CO2 emissions by 2045 and any interim CO2 emissions reduction targets, the Assets team will submit a committee report in 2021 setting new annual targets, identifying how the Council will assist in meeting these national targets, and where required, make the appropriate capital fund bids. In my view, taking on board all this information, we should then decide what funding is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. First of all, could I pay tribute to the Finance Convener, Councillor McMullen Douglas, and Ian Lorimer and his team for the fantastic amount of work they have done to get us to this stage. It's been an extremely difficult year with so many competing issues for funding, and to be able to come up with a balanced budget at this stage that is able to keep us as one of the lowest council tax in Scotland is a total achievement in itself. So full credit to all the team who put all this together. Not forgetting, of course, the Health and Social Care Partnership Finance team, Sandy Berry and others, who also worked very hard to get their finances in order. At this point, I'd also like to congratulate Councillor Duff. He has put an amazing amount of work in to try and come forward with his budget. And it's indicative to notice there is very little difference, as others have maybe said, between the two budgets. So obviously, most of things have been gotten quite right.
One difference I did notice, and I'm surprised at that, especially with all the work done by the finance team, is the SNP budget has removed extra finance posts that were created to try and get a more economic and better spending. Now, this is obviously shown how it can be done and how the Health Service Social Care Partnership has done it to improve the spending on pharmaceuticals and all the other ways of efficiencies. So this can be recouped time and hand over fist if the extra finance posts are there. There's been very short of staff to be able to do this, and to have the extra finance posts in place will allow us to get even better when it comes to bringing these efficiencies. A lot's been said on road repairs and potholes, and again, both budgets are putting extra into that. I chaired a member officer group quite a number of years ago looking at that, and we assessed at that time it would need an extra 61 million to address all the potholes in the area. So there's no way any of our budgets will begin to look at addressing the potholes. What we are trying to do now is improve the way they are repaired to make more permanent patching, although there will still need to be the emergency patching when big potholes occur, or we will be due for insurance claims. So we're trying to get on with that. But the one thing I do continually get, living on the boundary of Angus, we see what like roads are in neighbouring authorities. And I get continued comments that at least our roads are better than some of our neighbouring authorities. I don't want to name any, but we're doing pretty well on that with the money we're getting. Staying on roads, it's interesting. Another difference is the supply of an extra 25 or so snowplows. Well, snowplows this last few years haven't been overly used. I think there was just about 2 weeks this year they were utilised. So coming up with an extra 25 snowplows to sit doing very little, it doesn't seem a very prudent use of funds. And any farmers I have spoken to that have ploughs say they're in well-maintained and reasonable condition. And there's no requirement to have extra snowplows sitting in the ground doing very little most of the year. So I don't see that a very wise use of funding. Moving on, Councillor McLaren's already mentioned the extra spend on photovoltaic panels. Again, we should wait and see what the MOG comes up with to see where the best use can be made to create a better, greener environment. And on the capital spend, it does amuse me a little. It didn't seem that long ago where Brecon High School was replaced when I was at it, and £1 million was enough to replace a complete school at that time. I may be showing my age here, but for 50 million now required for a similar school, it just shows how inflation's got totally out of context. But thanks to all who've done all the hard work in getting us here. And I think we have to look forward to a very bright future. I also would like to just point out to Councillor Duff, he said that the prudency of this council didn't start at this administration. No, we started it in 2007 when we ran the administration before and started paying back a lot of the debt that we had incurred then. And it's good to see that councils subsequently have continued that prudent administration, and we've been able to continue and be in the position we are at now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Just a couple of quick points. In response to Councillor McLaren, while I appreciate that they're working on a plan for climate emergency, we'd like to see quicker and more spend. We've got £3 million in our alternative budget because we think it is indeed an emergency. The report going to committee this year means that any extra spend by the administration wouldn't happen until after next year's budget, and we think that's too late, quite frankly. As far as Councillor Miles' comments on the snowplough attachments, they're very affordable, and we don't expect the council to invest a great deal in equipment, their own equipment that will sit idle most years, but having extra capacity for severe weather incidents which doesn't cost too much, is prudent, we think. And finally, I thought Councillor MacDonald's remarks were very good about all of us trying to do the best that we can with the money we've got. And there's very strong feelings on either side about the active travel. I would just like to stress that in what I said already in my speech, we tried to listen to the people, and we also did not remove the project, we delayed it. But we've also been quite prudent in that we've allowed the whole spend for the school in the current 5-year plan. Now, should we discover that the public's buy-in to the project is very strong and we risk losing the funding and we want the project to go ahead, that could be accommodated by juggling the final year of the Montefiore High School spend into the next period. So we're trying to listen to the public and give flexibility here. We are not totally opposed to this. And that's all I've got to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Whiteside. Now, I don't see any further hands up for comments. So, Councillor McMillan-Douglas, do you wish to sum up now?
I'd very much like to sum up, Deputy Provost, and well done you for handling all this so well over the last 2 or 3 hours. I would like to get back to the themes of this budget. We've had a fascinating discussion around potholes and active travel in Arbroath, but I would like to get back to the main principles behind this budget. We want to help Angus and the people of Angus build for the future after a terrible year. To do this, we are keeping our council tax as the 2nd lowest in mainland Scotland. We are keeping council house rents low. We are keeping parking free in Angus until we recover sufficiently from the pandemic. We are continuing our major effort to encourage businesses to locate in Angus to generate jobs and spending power, and in the long run, that's probably the most important one of all, emphasised by Councillor Davey, and he's been doing a tremendous job as economic development spokesman. We are continuing to encourage the provision of high-speed broadband in rural as well as urban areas. And that gives me huge pleasure when I see the quality of much of the broadband now around Kirriemuir and Dean. And I'm sorry to mention Kirriemuir and Dean, but I'm actually rather proud of what we have done there. We are continuing to encourage the best education for our young people and are strengthening our social care team. And I, like Councillor Speed, I'm incredibly pleased that we are able to do something for children with disabilities. And I would have thought the whole council would be too. But you can only do these things if you can balance your budget in the first place. So the SNP have no alternatives for most of this. So we really, I think, are only coming down to 3 issues of difference that I could find, but I've missed the odd one. Active travel in Arbroath. Well, I think we're having this discussion a year late. I really do not understand why the SNP, and Councillor Duff is an extremely diligent man, as we all know. I cannot understand why we are having this debate 1 year after the funding agreement was signed. I mean, that's not really the way to run a ship, I would have thought. And so I'm surprised about that. And I really, really hope that whatever we do at this stage, that we don't do anything that prejudices Sustran and other bodies like Sustran's investment in Angus, because this administration has brought a lot of money in over the last 4 years. Secondly, we're having a spat about recycling centres. Now, here we are, without any question of doubt, with a hugely successful policy. We have moved ourselves up from low down the rankings. I know you want moves from place to place, but on the whole, middling in the rankings to virtually the top of the rankings in recycling. This is a practical environmental measure. We have done a phenomenal job, and we've done it because we adopted the right policy. And then we had people like Mr. Ball who had the competence to implement it. And yet, somehow, the SNP seem to be looking backwards and want to fight the battle of 4 years ago all over again. I'm almost speechless, but not quite. The third thing of disagreement, I think, is the £3 million to go into a PVC project or some other environmental project. Well, I'm not a great believer in getting your lump of money and then going and finding what you use it on. I would rather do it the other way around, which is what Councillor McLaren has been doing so successfully as chairman of the MOG, working out the strategy you wish to achieve and then finding the appropriate amount of money to invest in it. He has put money aside actually for this. It's not as much as £3 million, but it would certainly, I would think, do us through next this coming year. So, Deputy Provost, I am very confident in our budget. I think it's been well thought out by many people, and I think it is just a continuing step forward in running of Angus Council in a reasonably competent way. Huge thanks to Ian Lorimer, the whole management team of Angus Council, who have helped so much in all this, not just this year, but over the last 4 years. I simply don't understand why the SNP is so hung up on these 3 issues. I am very proud to move, or am I moving the motion now? I think I am. Taking the motion to the vote.
Thank you very much, Councillor McMillan Douglas. Okay then, Mr McCaskill, to the vote, please. Councillor Hand?
Yes, Deputy Provost, all pause. Councillor Hand.
Sorry, am I off mute?
Yes, you are, Councillor
Yeah,
Hand. Yes.
thank you. Yeah, I would just like to give notice of a further amendment, Deputy Provost.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr McCaskill, we vote on this one and then we hear the amendment, is that correct?
That's correct, Deputy Provost. We'll go to the vote. Firstly, the motion by Councillor McMillan Douglas, seconded by Councillor Salmond, is in terms of the first set of papers circulated at the meeting. The amendment by Councillor Duff, seconded by Councillor Whiteside, is in terms of the second set of papers circulated, and members should be aware that the terms of both the motion and the amendment are available online. I'll now ask Mrs Forsyth to take the roll call vote.
Thank you.
Deputy Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Bell.
Amendment.
Councillor Boyd.
Amendment.
Councillor Breeze.
Amendment.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown. I'll come back to Councillor Brown. I'm not sure if he's just lost connection. Councillor Cheap.
Amendment.
Councillor Davey.
Motion.
Councillor Devine.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Darnell. Amendment. Councillor Fairweather.
Motion.
Councillor Hands.
Amendment.
Councillor King.
Amendment.
Councillor Laurie.
Motion.
Councillor Lumgear.
Motion.
Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Motion.
Councillor MacDonald.
Amendment.
Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Moore.
Amendment.
Councillor Miles.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Salmond.
Motion.
Councillor Speed. Motion. Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Sturrock.
Motion.
Councillor Wan.
Motion.
Councillor Whiteside.
Amendment.
Councillor Brown.
Motion.
The motion's carried by 15 votes to 12.
Thank you very much, Mrs Forsyth. Councillor Hands, your amendment, do you wish to?
Yeah, can I ask if people have had it circulated?
Oh, I don't think they have.
Deputy Provost notes, now is the appropriate time for the amendment to be circulated.
Okay.
Mrs. Forsyth will do that by email again.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Email being sent, Deputy Provost and Councillor Hans.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to summarise the main points of the amendment. It's quite a long one, Deputy Provost, if that's okay.
Yes, of course it is.
Okay, and basically this is back to really thinking about people rather than the discussion we just had about potholes, etc. And it's really to acknowledge the significant harms that have been experienced by a lot of people during the last year during the COVID crisis. But it's also to recognise that there are some groups of people that have been more affected than others. So my proposal is that we amend report 75/21, assign £500,000 on a one-off basis from the COVID contingency fund for 2 projects, and I'll say a little bit more about them in a second. But I would just like to draw members' attention to a report that came out from Professor Marmot from University College London late last year. And he was reflecting on the impact of COVID on different groups. And basically what he's highlighted is we really seriously, in the recovery phase, need to focus on children and young people, and especially the children that have been most remote from accessing school and the ones that have dealt with multiple issues on top of the fact that the school has been disrupted. The second point he made in his report as well was the importance of an inclusive recovery. So that's what my amendment is attempting to cover. And although I've ordered the amendment in a different order, I would like to take the second proposal first, if that's okay. And that's basically to award £300,000 to the Corporate Parenting Board to help with projects that will assist children and young people living looked after at home, but also again focusing on the most disadvantaged children in our area. And that's basically children that have also been affected through increased poverty, mental health and relationship breakdowns. And I'm not really going to say much more than that because Councillor Whiteside's going to say some more when she seconds me. The other element of my amendment is to assign a sum of £200,000 to a community resilience fund. And the idea behind that fund is basically we facilitate local community organisations to develop, and we resource the local community local community resilience plans. And I'll say a bit more about that shortly as well. And I think we can broadly focus this on 4 themes. And these are flooding, winter maintenance, local accessibility improvements, and also health and well-being. Again, the recognition that some groups in our communities have been more disadvantaged than others through the COVID situation. So I've listed in the amendment some of the items that could be covered. That's not an exhaustive list, it's just illustrative. And also the amendment goes on to explain how I think that the fund could be organised, but I'm not really going to go into more detail than that at the moment. Happy to take questions on it. But what I would just like to say is that the harms from COVID are going to be with us for quite some time. We heard the leader of the council this afternoon at the beginning say all the different things that have been going on, and obviously this is going to take a lot longer than just one budget year to resolve some of these issues. It's going to be difficult for the council. It's also going to be difficult for our community planning partners as well. But I think we've really got a fantastic resource in our local people and local communities. They have done a wonderful job during the last year in supporting one another as well. And I think we've got the opportunity to tap into that resource and help improve the situation across Angus. Again, today there's been mention of the council plan and the key objectives. The second one of them, and quite rightly so, personally I would put it the first objective rather than the second, but it's maximising inclusion and reducing inequality. And I think this plan, my amendment actually covers all of that. I think the other thing in the plan as well is it talks about the importance of supporting people and improving place. And again, my amendment does that as well. So I'd like just to turn to why I'm bringing the amendment. And it actually started with a couple of incidents close together, 2 days apart in January. And I've also reflected on the recent reports for sustainable travel strategy for report 43/21 and also report 44/21, which was the winter maintenance review that's been referred to earlier as well. But I just want to tell you a wee story about, and again, everybody's been saying that you know, we got a lot of emails in January about the weather, and we did. It was a bumper inbox, to say the least. I got one that really struck a chord with me, and it was about a constituent who had CCTV in his property, but he got a shock when he discovered a lady had fallen down his drive, right down his drive, but she wasn't able to get back up again. That poor woman had to crawl up the drive in order to use a garden wall to get back up on her feet. And I have to say, that sort of situation, I've been in that situation with poor weather myself, and crawling across the road to try and find somewhere that you can get to lean on to get up, it's pretty humiliating. And I think we've got the opportunity here to actually invest in our communities and help give people the resource for people to find local solutions to help local people. We've heard a lot this afternoon as well about active travel. We've also heard quite a bit recently about accessible Angus. But members, I'm asking you to consider the possibility of also promoting an accessible, inclusive.
Hello.
Who?
Who's that?
Sorry, I don't know why I'm getting interrupted.
I think somebody was off mute, Councillor Hans, but they've been muted now.
Right, oh, okay, thank you. I'm going to lose my place, I think. Yeah, but I mean, I think again, what I would say about the proposal for the resilience plan and fund, it gives local people the opportunity to find local solutions and to help themselves. And I'm going to come back now to the reason why I mentioned the sustainable travel strategy as well. I was actually quite shocked reading that report last week. It mentioned there was about a quarter of the people in Angus that don't either go round the local community, don't or can't. And I just wonder really why that is. And I suspect for some people, they don't feel particularly safe. So whilst during the last lockdown, more than this one, but still in this one, people getting out and about in the local area was really important for physical and mental health, but not everybody can do that. But you know what, I think there'll be a lot more people that could if we just actually gave our local communities some of the resource to actually do small things that are actually quite significant for individuals. So I think that the resilience plan and fund would allow local communities to improve the possibilities for many other people, mainly older people, people with disabilities, children as well. It could be something that encourages children to get out to improve their health and well-being as well. Again, I said that in the amendment, I've given some examples. It certainly isn't exhaustive. But I think if we encourage people to take part in looking at how they can improve their area, I think ultimately that could have an impact in getting people to ditch the car more and to try it and take more active and make more active use of the local community. So I would just plead with members, the report that I mentioned earlier, the title of that is actually called Build Back Fairer. We've got the opportunity this afternoon, members, to start building back Angus fairer. Please support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hand. Councillor Whiteside?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm actually delighted to second this amendment because the benefits will be felt across every council ward, and I'm sure this is why everybody across the table can support this today. The first part of the amendment relating to community resilience has been covered in some detail there by Councillor Hands, and is one which will resonate with every member across the council. I can't be alone in hearing about examples either. For instance, frustration during the recent severe weather. With limited pavement gritting capacity by the council, some residents were willing and able to help grit pavements themselves. The problem was insufficient grit bins to do so. However, when requesting a new grit bin, some were told that their location didn't meet the criteria. So no gritting by the council and no means to help themselves. Extremely frustrating, as I'm sure you all experienced. This is just one example of ways in which the proposed fund could help improve our community resilience. The second part of the amendment deals with the additional funds proposed to improve outcomes for looked after and other disadvantaged children to engage with education. Now, following this morning's Children and Learning Committee, we can be in no doubt that the disruption to education for all our young people has had the biggest impact on this group of children. The ambition of this amendment marries with the primary focus of the updated National Improvement Framework, which includes closing the poverty-related attainment gap. The report acknowledges that lockdown has been particularly difficult for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. And as reported in the committee papers, the Scottish Government Equity Audit finds that school building closures may have most negatively impacted socio-economically deprived children and younger people. From advice taken from our directors, Catherine Lindsay and Kelly McIntosh, we know that this population of young people can find it more challenging to engage with education, and that the challenges during the COVID period have been exacerbated, risking the widening of the attainment gap. They anticipate that this group of young people may need a more tailored approach to support the return to pre-COVID school routines. If members were to agree to this amendment, the specific use of the additional funds would be decided by the relevant officers. This would enable them to explore either the provision, commissioning, or both of additional practical support and or mentoring for families in their own homes or communities. Additionally, it would augment a holiday activity programme, including learning opportunities at no cost to participants. In considering this amendment, it's probably worth us all reflecting on the importance placed on taking action to fulfil our corporate parenting responsibilities and our roles as councillors. Additionally, we should note the aim in the council plan of creating equity by focusing services on those who need them most. I urge you to support this motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Whiteside.
Members, sorry, apologies. Could I actually just point out something that I meant to say, but I got thrown off what I was saying because of the noise in the background? It was just one point that I think is quite important.
Yes, of course, Councillor Hand. Carry on.
Yeah, I did say that there was 2 items in January. The one about the lady falling down the drive. The other one was, unbelievably, 2 days later at a community council meeting in the same area, I discovered that a community resilience plan template had been drawn up. Nothing has been populated in that plan, and obviously there was no resource to back it up as well. So that's why I'm saying and suggesting in the amendment that we should be encouraging more places across Angus to develop these plans, but not just have a template sitting there. Let's fill them up and let's provide the resources to make them very, very helpful for the local area.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, before we go to questions, do you feel you want maybe a 15-minute adjournment to discuss this? Councillor Fairweather?
Yes, Chair. Now we should have an adjournment to discuss this.
Okay, well, 15-minute adjournment, and we'll come back and we'll have questions then, okay? And you've got your links from before. Thank you.